The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Gate City Chronicles. I'm Kevin Avard, your host, and today we have a new guest, and her name is Elaine Holden. And I want to welcome you to the show. And Elaine, you are part of the Children's Dyslexia Center of Nashua.
Correct.
Right? And you're also a member of the CDC?
Well, I sit
That's
on
the same thing, right?
Yes, I sit on the governing board of the Nashua Center.
Right. Now, this is downtown Nashua?
Correct. It's right on Main Street.
Now, I know a man, his name was Forrest McCurley. Are you familiar with Forrest McCurley? I believe he gave to the Masonic Hall.
Yes.
And he was very interested in dyslexia. And I knew him personally as a friend for years. And I remember the stack of books that this man read continually. And you know, his eyes were always going like this, even when he wasn't reading. You know, it's just a function of Forrest, but a very good man and very interested in education. I don't know if you knew him.
No, I've certainly heard of him, but I did not know him personally.
Yeah, he is part of the McCurley nursing home chain, which is now Genesis.
Yes.
But very philanthropic, very good man, very nice family. But yeah, he had a very interest in education and teaching. And dyslexia was one of his passions, from what I understand, and that was new to me. I didn't know that, but so that's where the office is. I'm just trying to link those together. So, how did you get involved with this organization?
I was asked to sit on the board of governors. I am a dyslexia specialist. Mm-hmm. I have pretty much built my entire adult career diagnosing and working up prescriptive treatments for dyslexics. I am a fellow in the Academy of Orton-Gillingham Practitioners and Educators. That's an international organization that is sort of the umbrella organization that oversees all multisensory language-based reading programs for dyslexics. There are about 155, 160 fellows worldwide, and we are essentially licensed to diagnose and to treat, as well as teach others how to work with dyslexics, how to use those multisensory techniques so that they will be able to teach those children how to read.
Now, just having a conversation with you off camera, I was under the impression of many false impressions. And so it's good that you're here for everybody to understand. But I always thought that dyslexics were individuals that were seeing letters backwards. And that could be the furthest thing from the truth. Absolutely.
I think that started out when the term dyslexia was used. It's a fairly modern term. It was originally called strephosymbolia, which is twisted symbol. And that was coined by Dr. Samuel Torrey Orton of the Orton-Gillingham reading program. Mm-hmm. The research since the 1920s has progressed dramatically. And we now know, based on the research done by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, that the majority of dyslexics actually have difficulty in the phonological processing of the brain. So when you look at human evolution, you see that the human brain has evolved to acquire language. It is biologically primary in the human brain to acquire language, to speak, to hear, to be able to transmit thoughts and ideas and information. And we go from sentences to words to syllables. And then within the syllables, we have sounds. And those sound sequences are what makes our words. We have probably close to 1 million words in the English language. Probably about 600,000 of them are in common use. But we make all of these words with only 45 sounds. We only have 45 sounds, 45 phonemes in the English language. What happens with the dyslexic is that those language centers in the brain sort of stall at that sound, at that phoneme spot, so that they can, in fact, process language to a pretty good extent, but they are not as skilled as the garden variety reader, for example. It affects about 15% of the population. And in that 15%, you have the majority unable to conceptualize those sound shifts in syllables. So, for example, if I said slick and silk, well, those are the same sounds. S-o-ik, s-i-o-k. I switched I and O. We can understand, we can conceptualize it auditorily. We don't have to see it visually. But the dyslexic is unable to conceptualize those sound shifts to make two different words, just with those changes in those phonemes.
An auditorial, which I find absolutely amazing. So, and then I did ask you a question about music and syllables with regard to music, but that would be something a little bit different. But when you're reading symbols, sometimes your eye doesn't catch up with your brain, or or your eyes don't track as properly. So basically, again, what I was understanding is there are different types of dyslexia, not just the audible, but then there's just the reading track. Instead of going up and down, there's the sideways. How do you diagnose that? What is the process with that?
We actually, theoretically, there are tests out there to test for dyslexia, but there's really no one test that will allow us to say this child is dyslexic or this child is not dyslexic, which is why you would go to a pediatrician or you would go to an academy fellow. That would be me. And so many times we work hand in hand with pediatricians. They'll either refer to us, we'll refer to them. But essentially what you're looking for are a set of characteristics. You know that it's a language processing deficit, so that there is something wrong with the language system in the brain. Because in order to read, although our brain evolved to speak, our brain did not evolve to read. So to read, we have to borrow the languaging centers of the brain. We borrow that language processing center in the brain, and we start to match up those sounds with those little squibbles on the page. We've got 26 little squibbles, we've got 45 sounds, and then we have probably about 80 to 84 what we call common phonograms, different ways we can mix those little symbols, those little letters up to make those sounds. So what you're doing is looking at the page and translating those little squibbles to the sound sequence of the words that we have acquired in our language development as from infancy onward.
So when you see a child struggling in your elementary years with reading, and they're really struggling through it, are they always dyslexic?
Yes. But it is something that you can treat successfully. You can teach virtually every single child to read. If somebody says, well, that child is just not a reader, I would respectfully say that's a load of horse puckies, because not all children are born capable of learning to read naturally from that top-down approach. Here's a book. You know, they'll walk into school, they've already read the back of the cereal package, they'll read anything. You have a group of children, as I said, 15% of the population that will walk in and they're not natural readers. The goal is to get early intervention to make sure that they have those 45 sounds, they can conceptualize those 45 sounds shifting using their auditory modality, they can hold those sounds in sequence, again auditorily, to blend them together to make words, and then match them up with the symbols.
How important is phonics?
Phonics is something that will work if they have phonemic awareness. If they don't have those sounds at the auditory level, you can throw the book at them with phonics, and it's really not going to work. Somebody's going to say, well, phonics hasn't worked. Well, it hasn't worked because that child is not ready for the phonics yet. The phonics itself should be part of a basic reading program. You should have the good literature, that top-down, the whole language. You know, give them the good in the reading, but they also have to have that bottom-up, direct, systematic approach to make sure that you've met all of the necessary components in reading.
Mm-hmm.
For the dyslexic, you have to go many steps more, and you have to teach them the sounds. They have to be able to isolate, to conceptualize, to blend, and then when you get all that done, then you teach them the symbols and how those symbols are configured to make the words in the language.
Is it that much more difficult for dyslexics once they get these symbols and they get these sounds? Is it still a lot more work for them to read?
Not necessarily. It depends. We have what's called comorbid conditions or co-occurring conditions. Just because a child has phonological processing, is a so-called dysphonetic dyslexic, that doesn't mean that everything is all set once you've fixed those sounds and those symbols.
Mm-hmm.
The child can also be what we call a slow namer. It takes longer to get information in the brain, out the mouth. So they might not be as fast. You
Right.
have children with visual processing issues that may struggle
Right.
to retain visually presented information.
When I was in elementary school, there were times where they would hand you a book and you had to read openly in front of the class. And sometimes you wonder if it was just nerves or if you were actually struggling to read. And I have to confess that I was one of those that struggled. And you didn't like reading in public because your eyes didn't follow the page as quickly. And so you felt dumb.
Yeah.
And that's a pain that some of these children, unless they're diagnosed, they can go through the entire elementary school feeling stupid.
Yes.
And when they get into that realm, they can give up. They can turn to drugs. They can feel unworthy of society.
You want some more statistics? The one common characteristic between juvenile justice offenders and something else is dyslexia. The majority of juvenile justice offenders are dyslexic. How many 6-year-old kids walk into the school for the first day and you say, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And the kid says, oh, I want to be an illiterate drug dealer and go to jail. It doesn't happen. They are psyched. They're ready. They want to learn to read and write and do all that great stuff.
And then they see the other kids excelling and
Yes.
you're not following into their pattern and you think, what's wrong with me?
The job of childhood is learning to read. If they cannot learn and do this first job, it will have profound effects throughout their lifetime.
And it might take a lifetime to get over.
If it does.
Yeah.
The majority of people in jails have a 4th grade reading level or below. If you want to see the largest collection of adult dyslexics, walk into any jail in the country. They are bright people, and they were never taught to read.
Right.
And this is a serious issue. This is something that is not going away.
Well, it's a matter of, it's interesting. Having met with deaf people,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I'm going to relate this, but I've walked by in church years back, past some deaf people,
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. And finally one day I couldn't bear it anymore. I had to stop and talk to them. And I didn't know how. And so I started doing, I wish I could talk to you. And they started teaching me how to, hi,
Sure.
And we opened up that communication.
Yes.
But I find that people that are dyslexic, although they're not deaf, they are kind of they're separated from communicating.
Yes.
And from those that want to communicate to them,
Yes.
they're like the deaf folk that
Yes.
can't communicate,
Yes.
and there's that barrier.
Yes.
And so when somebody hands you a book, oh, you got to read this. Oh, yeah. Well, you're miles and miles, and
Right.
you're worlds apart, and you can't enjoy. So you either become a great listener,
Uh-huh.
or you just tune out.
And it's interesting about what you're bringing up with the deaf, because chronic otitis media with effusion, technical terms.
Of course.
Of course.
One of those.
Ear infections.
Mm-hmm.
Children you know, nationwide, I think we have 16 million visits to pediatricians every year for children with ear infections. Pretty common. In New Hampshire, we've probably got about 11% of our school population, grades 1 through 12, currently suffering from the after effects of chronic ear infections. That is a very common link to children that don't develop that understanding of the 45 phonemes. They've lost the window. So they walk in with a history of ear infections. We know genetically that dyslexia is frequently associated with an impaired immune system. This may be the first red flag to say that this child has a problem that is going to go beyond the immune system and into that language processing center of the brain. We don't know why these genetic links happen, they just do. But the bottom line is that these children do not acquire those sounds. It's compounded by the fact that they've had ear infections. It's like their head's been in a bucket. They can't hear the sounds when those windows of opportunity are there, and they walk into school almost as if they have a history of deafness.
In the dark.
And that's why they're young. That's why they don't associate well with some of their peers. That's why reading becomes such a challenge for them.
So within the school systems, are we tracking this in our public school systems? Are we successfully tracking? Is standardized testing helping?
No.
I just
no.
The reason
No.
I'm asking that is because, you know, I sit on an education committee, and you know, I don't hear too much about dyslexia. We hear about standardized testing and Common Core and all that kind of stuff, but one of the things that you really can't evaluate if you're teaching to a student, I don't hear how we're helping students learn to read better.
You're right.
But this is a real problem.
It's a major problem.
And by diagnosing it, do we have programs already in place that are in our schools to say, you know what, he's really not doing, or she's not doing good on this test. I wonder why. Is there other programs for them to be tested outside or in our in our system?
Well, first of all, with the testing, the standardized testing and this big push to testing, you know, I'm an old New Hampshire person. My family's old New Hampshire farm people. You don't fatten up a calf by weighing it every day. You
Where were you today in committee? That's funny. I'm going to remember that.
You need to, because the bottom line is we can take all this instructional time and we can keep testing, and when those tests don't work, we're going to throw more tests at them, and we've got 180 days worth of school. Well, let's take up a good chunk of it by testing the kids.
That seems to be a major complaint, is the over-testing.
It's huge, and it's costing us as taxpayers, it's costing them instructional time, and I suspect it's driving the teachers crazy.
They're competing with the testing.
Of course they are, and that's wrong. And, you know, the other thing is that when you're looking at 180 days, that's pretty much nothing. I mean, when you see the other countries in the world that are really making progress, they're looking well beyond 180 days. We are basing our school system on an agrarian society that we were 200 years ago. And we now have to really revisit how we teach our children as well as what we teach our children.
Right.
As far as the programs go, the reading wars have been over a long time, a really long time. Everybody's saying whole language phonics, whole language phonics. Well, we know that for 50% of the population, the whole language top-down approach works just fine. Give them the books, give them the literature, teach them, they're ready to read. For that bottom 50%, they need that direct, systematic, bottom-up approach. Here are the sounds, here's where we work with the sounds, here are those little scribbles, those letters that go with the sound. They need that direct, systematic programming.
They're not dumb, they're not special needs.
They're not dumb, they're not. And you know, if we keep them in special needs, what's going to happen is you're going to overwhelm your special ed department more and more and more. That doesn't mean that you have to dump it on the classroom teacher, because the classroom teachers have a tremendous amount that they're already responsible for. Bottom line is, we don't have enough reading professionals that can handle what is really needed is a one-on-one situation with these children with sufficient intensity of instruction to make them work their way along that reading continuum to the point where they can actually read, decode, and then get on to what this story says. Because everybody has a different amount of memory, okay? Nobody's asking to increase memory. All we're trying to do is automatize those lower level skills so it doesn't take up so much memory. It's like driving a car. You know, when you first drive a car, you're 16. You got a clutch, the gear shift, the gas, the rear view mirror. You've got all of that mechanical stuff. You've got your mother sitting there with her arm out saying, you're going to kill us all, ready to grab the wheel. You can only concentrate on keeping that car on the road. All of your working memory is dealing with the mechanics. There's nothing left over. As you practice, you have maybe a little memory that's freed up. You can listen to a radio or maybe have a conversation. Now that you have been driving a long time.
Now you can text and drive. I'm so kidding. Don't do that. I'm just kidding.
But think about it. Have you ever gotten into your car in the morning, driven out the driveway, and then suddenly you're at work and you don't know how you got there? Because all of the lower level mechanics were so automatic that you were now thinking about nothing but all of those higher level things. What you're going to do with your day, who you're going to talk to, the committees you're going to sit on, the people you're going to deal with. All of those higher level things in that open memory space. Your memory hasn't changed. You've automatized the lower level skills. This is what we want. We want those lower level skills so automatic that all of the memory that that child has can now be devoted to understanding. But if you don't teach those lower level skills and they don't have automatic sound symbol understanding and they don't read well, then what happens? They don't have enough memory open to understand what they're reading.
And by the way, I just want to clarify, special needs does not mean you're dumb. It just means you have special needs for education. But I just wanted to clarify that. I wanted to ask you another question about the center, though. What is how do you get involved with the center? How do people, if you recognize or you think that your child is struggling with dyslexia, do they reach out to the center? I mean, is
yes,
this
absolutely.
Absolutely. What do you provide there? How do they get involved?
Well, we don't charge anybody. Essentially, we have two areas that we are working on. One is training teachers. We try to get really capable people to become Orton Gillingham tutors, okay? I teach at Riviere, at the Graduate School of Education. I've been there for about 20 years, and I sometimes have some really bright students, and I will say to them, you know, I'm going to give you the name of the director of the Children's Dyslexia Center in Nashua. I think you'd benefit from that training. And they go and they meet the director, Elaine Holden. They have a conversation. She signs them up many times if they show an interest for our training. And it's essentially an opportunity to learn how to deliver direct, systematic, language-based, multisensory instruction in reading. So these people become fully trained. They have to have practicum. They have to have 100 hours of practicum at least. So we set them up with children that are brought to the center by their parents. The parents say, you know, child can't read. We don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. We'll test. We'll determine if the child is a candidate, and if so, we set the child up with a tutor who then uses that child to practice. But we have people mentoring, we have people supervising their lesson plans, we have people watching them to make sure it's done just right. So you have seasoned professionals training and observing all the time to make sure that these student teachers are doing a good job.
Where do they do this? In the home, at the center?
They do it at the center. Nice little isolated, very quiet office space for all our tutors, and it's a one-on-one. It's only one-on-one. That's
how
all
long? How long do you set aside a time to do that per student? For instance, Johnny came home from school. We're going to go to the center. For an hour? 45?
An hour.
Okay.
Yeah, twice a week. Now, there are some dyslexics that need 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, one-on-one instruction. There's all different ranges of dyslexia, from very mild to extremely severe. So you have to determine what the needs are. Orton-Gillingham twice a week will help all children, but there are some children that need far beyond that.
Right.
And so that also has to be part of the recommendation to the parents. You know, this is what else is needed. But right now, this is what we can provide twice a week for an hour, you know, say on Tuesday and an hour on Thursday at no charge.
And speaking of that, what are the logistics as far as getting involved? I mean, is it just you going signing up and saying, could you test my child? I mean, how does that work?
Yes,
Is that involved?
It's not terribly involved. You go in and you either get onto the website or you make a phone call to the center and talk to the director and get more information, and then see where the children are at, basically, as far as, you know, in school, how they're doing. Are they reading at all? Are they falling dramatically behind? What's the story? And it's on, you know, you're looking at an individual child. So you're really looking at an individual profile every single time. Mm-hmm. And then if that profile fits, then certainly we would try very hard to make room for that child in the program.
Now, what capacity are you at this point? Are you?
We're at maximum capacity with a waiting list, yes.
With a waiting list,
yes.
Okay.
It's not huge, but we do have a waiting list. I mean, there's not a lot of places that will service dyslexia at no cost.
Why is there a waiting list? Is it because of volunteers, because of funding?
Well, we're only so big.
Right.
We're only so big, and we can only take so many people in that facility.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, we can only have so many teachers, and we can have only so many students. And that's the nature of basically the business, because it's only one-on-one.
What kind of progress have you had in 30 seconds, if you could tell me?
Dramatic, dramatic. These are the children that ordinarily would never have made it through. Most children would have terminated their education early, and these children have gone on to very successful experiences educationally.
So if you wouldn't mind looking at the camera and making a plea to the public, if your child needs these services, what are the, in 59 seconds, how would you do that?
Call the center, Children's Dyslexia Center. Look on the website for the Children's Dyslexia Center. Get in touch with the director. Find someone that sits on the Board of Governors. We are listed, I believe, on the center. Get in touch. Talk to us. Tell us what your child's needs are. We will do our darndest to make sure that we can help you help your child. I mean, that's really our mission.
Thank you for coming on Gate City Chronicles.
Thank you so much.
Don't let your child fall through the cracks. If you suspect that they're having difficulties with learning, it could be a problem that they would suffer through their life. Early detection is one of the best things that you can do, and you can save them from a lot of internal suffering and help them with their personal self-esteem. Trust me on this. So until next week, thanks for watching Gate City Chronicles, and we hope this episode has been helpful to you. Thank you for watching Gate City Chronicles, and we want to thank our sponsor, Avard Cleaning. They've been a sponsor for quite a few years now, and we appreciate them being a sponsor. And if you want to be a guest on our show, contact accessnashua@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story. Until next week, thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.